All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the final session of the Modjeska Simkins School of Human Rights for the 2024 year. My name again is Dr. Robert Green II. I'm the lead instructor of the Modjeska Simkins School. And tonight will be a mix of history and also application to the here and now. The thing about the Modjeska Simkins School is that unlike other courses on history, this school dares to ask the question, how do we utilize this history for larger, grander goals? And tonight we'll get a bit of the history of the Progressive Network, but we'll also be getting into what's been going on in the state for the last 30 years. Now, I've joked before about how a lot of our friends and allies across the country, every 4 years or so, will see the state of South Carolina on a presidential election map and say, oh, it's a red state. Nobody really cares about it. There's something going on down there. But we all know that's not really the case. There's actually a lot of progressive activism, a lot of radical work being done in this state, in the here and now. Now, up to this point, we've been talking a lot about the history of that activism, of that radicalism, from the Stonewall Rebellion to Robert Smalls, from Satima Clark to Modjeska Simkins, and so many other folks. But tonight we're going to bring things up to the here and now. However, before we do that, I do want to share a quick reminder with the class. Do keep in mind that today is the 9th anniversary of the massacre at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 great, fantastic individuals were taken from their earthly lives by, I would say, of the range gunmen, but that's not really true. Their lives were taken by someone who represents, quite frankly, the worst of South Carolina and the worst of American life in terms of white supremacy. So I want to take a moment to have a brief moment of silence for 9 men and women who were killed in Charleston 9 years ago today. Thank you very much. Again, today is the 9th anniversary of the Mother Emanuel massacre, but today is not just a day for mourning. Today, in many ways, is also a day of celebration in terms of thinking about what we've learned so far in this class, and also thinking deeply about how you can take the lessons you've learned from this class and apply them to current everyday problems. Of course, the bigger celebration will be this Saturday at 2 o'clock when we host our Modjeska Simkins graduation. I'm hoping to see all of you there. Usually every year, especially in the not really post, but during the COVID years, we've had folks come in who we've only seen on Zoom. So again, we'll hear more details about our graduation ceremony later this evening. But speaking of COVID, of course, Brett is joining us via Zoom. He and Becky are still currently battling against COVID. I just want to tell folks really quickly before I turn the floor over to Brett that while the news media has largely stopped talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, contrary to popular belief, the pandemic is ongoing. I've had plenty of friends of mine who have caught COVID the last month or so. Every indicator I've heard through the grapevine says that we're kind of another COVID season as we speak. So please, please, please be careful out there. Be careful if you're going to the store, to the mall, anywhere that's indoors. Just be careful out there, because while we think we're done with COVID, COVID is not done with us. So again, I want to turn the floor over to Brett to really take us down memory lane a bit, but also take us down thinking about what we can do here in South Carolina. Brett, go ahead. And Brett, you are surprisingly still muted.
Is this being recorded?
Yes, as Stephen Colbert said, the most famous 3 words of the pandemic will be unmute yourself. But I wanted to also recognize, I wouldn't exactly call it a celebration, that 10 years ago, um, the first class that we did in our new building was in 2020, right when the pandemic was starting, and we had the orientation, and then we went on Zoom. And it appears as toothpaste, the advancement of technology is something we can't put back in the tube. And so here I am, 10 years later, taking advantage of the toothpaste to be able to speak to you while I have COVID from the comfort of my home. Thank you, Dr. Green, so far for introducing me. And I want to lift up that song that opened the thing. Now, Dave Lippman is an old comrade of mine that goes back many years, many wars, many battles, and Dave has been our troubadour. He wrote that song. And we sang that for much of a year, riding around the state in that little trailer that was a very large trailer, actually, with a sound system and lights. And that was our Healthy Democracy campaign. But what the evidence is that you can and shall have fun while you're doing the right thing. And so it was clearly an enjoyment that we had, and we were in parades and teaching truth. But what I wanted to do today, in that we skipped the class, the last class was talking about the nuts and bolts of the history of the Progressive Network. And today we're supposed to be talking about, well, how you can put this stuff into effect. Well, what I want to do is to combine those in a way that doesn't take the time to talk about all the different things that we've done, but to talk more about why we did them and how we approach doing them, not what we did. Because the what we did isn't as important as the consideration that went into it. And that one of the realities of doing transformational work, this is work that we're trying to change society. We're trying to change the values of society. We're not as they call a transactional organization that is looking to push a button and see results, or to pull a lever and cast a vote, but to actually change the value system that's driving the system. And so that transformational stuff, the main target of the transformation and the main beneficiary of the transformation is the participants. And so all of these things that we've done have an understanding that these are opportunities for you to actually live and act on your values. And we have done over the decades a lot of things like this. Hundreds of people arrested, sitting in various streets in various places for various causes that people enjoyed. They enjoy the opportunity to be able to go on record as standing up against nuclear weapons, or standing up for health care, or opposing cutting budgets that were going to hurt people in ways that they needed health care and education. And so that's a really integral part of the transformation that we're working on is you. And that we also want to arrange these things where we're working on implementing the radical revolution of values. I want everybody to kind of have that as a mantra as to what it is that you're doing when people ask you. You say that you're following Dr. King's call for a radical revolution of values. Because the war and the racism and the poverty that we're opposing are built into a predatory system of profit. We can mitigate some of the damage. We can't really vote it away, because both the system that supports the two-party system, the corporations, and the two-party system, they're anomalies in terms of a civilization, and a civilization that professes to look for equality and the various aspects of the quality of life that we want to see from cradle to grave. I believe that everybody has, over the course of these classes about the people's history, and the people's history of South Carolina being so impactful on the people's history of the United States, has come to understand the predatory nature of our domestic and foreign policy. And that the lasting effect of these things has accumulated in what we're seeing today is an election system that is basically a performance art that's designed to sustain the status quo. It's created by the status quo, funded by the status quo to create and maintain the status quo. And that the big picture of our analysis that started the Progressive Network, going back to GROW and before GROW, I was involved in the civil rights movement before I was involved in GROW, and was working with Modjeska, Simkins and other people that had been fighting the good fight for the same reasons we're fighting now, some of the same conceptual enemies that are supporting the status quo. And so we started with a radical analysis, and that sets us aside from any other organization that I'm aware of in South Carolina, being a nonpartisan nonprofit. We have always called ourselves nonpartisan, and we're tending towards calling ourselves anti-partisan because, as you Modjeska school students know, there ain't no parties in the Constitution. And George Washington warned us about them. He says you'll end up with two to fight amongst themselves for money and power. I'm paraphrasing. And that we clearly have a circumstance that is unique in the democratic world, that the only two-party system that was made up and supported by the people that benefit from the two-party system, that doesn't have any room at this point in its existence for compromise. And what we've been doing over the last 26 years now that we started the Progressive Network, when we came out of GROW, we had a statewide newspaper and a print shop, and we'd run the statewide newspaper for 6 years before we started the Progressive Network. And the statewide newspaper's intent was to help build a movement of shared values in South Carolina. And it was clearly one of the best things we ever did. And Becky Robbins was the one that made it the best thing. And she's never forgiven me for not being able to keep that ball in the air. And she's still doing great writing. And I know that we all are learning from it and appreciating it. But that when we started the network at a meeting at Penn Center in 1996, it was basically a liberal effort consciously is to not put people off that weren't radicals. And that I want everybody in this class to think about it, because we're going to call you out at some point before or during the graduation, sometime between now and then, to say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm a revolutionary. And this is kind of like the AA meetings. We want everybody to step up and acknowledge the fact that we've got to admit that these values that are driving this planet over the cliff are not values that we support, and they're values that we need to be consciously opposed to and working to not only oppose them, but to manifest the good values in our daily existence. So when we started the network, there were 28 organizations at the table at Penn Center of different levels of awareness, from different walks of life, different colors, different genders and sexes and everything. And that we were looking for that common value of things that we agreed with and shared. And it was not easy. We spent a weekend that there were a lot of tears and all, but we did come up with an understanding that racism was kind of a cornerstone of problems in South Carolina that affected mostly everything else. You had to work through the gay issues and being involved with that. We had people that we had invited to come and offer their observations that had strong state movements, one in Georgia that was focusing on poverty and housing, and one in Missouri, in St. Louis, that was focusing using unions and working people. And they had their emphasis more on electoral politics in that C4. And both of them said you can't be this broad and be functional. You've got to narrow it down. You've got to narrow your focus down. And we didn't. And Becky, I think, has shared a piece called Casting the Net, which was the first reference in the Point newspaper about the formation of the Progressive Network. And these are pictures from Penn Center, and some of these are the original meeting there. You just saw Gilda Cobb Hunter and Joe Neal. There's a much younger and Cuter Brett and the lovely Becky there. Um, Clementa Pinckney's in one of these pictures. Went right after he won his first election. He had been preaching since he was 5, and that's Joe Neal right there. And that we had a really diverse crowd that not all on the same level, but we all came away with at least some sense of unity of purpose, that the Progressive Network had things to work on, and we could focus on the things we agreed on. And so we set out to research problems that we could then use that research to be able to articulate solutions and to be able to organize around them and to get people involved in lifting up the problem. And so identifying racism certainly was very difficult. And that the first project we actually had was about money and politics. And if you recall, the reality that 80% plus of the money that is now funding elections in South Carolina is corporate money. And the other thing that is not in the Constitution is the corporations. And corporations were not people. And the corporations were actually lived a very specific purpose and a limited lifespan. And so we now have a two-party system feeding from corporations, which was pretty much the worst-case scenario the Founding Fathers warned us about. But that the money in politics, South Carolina in 1996 was the only state in the nation that didn't have electronic filing for candidates and that kept track of campaign contributions. And you had to go into the Ethics Commission in Columbia with a pencil and paper, sign in, and pull someone's file, and the Ethics Commission would tell whoever's file you pulled that you had pulled it. So it was a rather intimidating process and time-consuming. Obviously, didn't live in Columbia and have that type of interest to go make notes. And Becky and I had been involved with a Southwide project called Democracy South during the Grow days leading up to Progressive Network, and it was a campaign finance organization. And so we went into that effort with some backup and some understanding of how it was being done in other states. And the director of the Ethics Commission, I'd asked him, I said, we want to make some copies. And he said, yo, what do you want? And I said, everything. And we rented 2 copy machines and hired students and senior citizens who spent 600 hours copying boxes and boxes and boxes of campaign donations and expenses. And we sent that off to a place called the National Institute of Money and State Politics. Their website is followthemoney.org. And they had a grant and they keyed it in. And we created this first searchable database. Before, in the interim, while that was happening, Representative Neal and I think Clementa Pinckney was a House member at the time. He became a senator while we were still fighting for clean elections. But that they introduced legislation for clean elections. And it was predicated on a system that's used elsewhere. But we did the numbers and how much was spent and how much was raised and how much it cost and how much it would cost to have public subsidies of elections, to take the private donations out of campaigning. And it came out to about a penny a person a day, $3.65 a day, for us to take all the private money out of the funding cycle. And it would be allowed to build a pool that would equal the average amount spent to win a seat. And that if your opponent didn't sign in to be a clean candidate, you could get increases up to 3 times as much as the average amount to win a race. And so it was a very attractive plan, and it never got a hearing. Never got a hearing. But it was a really good plan, and people thought it was a great idea. But that's the type of thing that we do, not necessarily thinking we're going to win that fight, but that we're going to educate people about the problem caused by money in politics, being able to draw. This is now a database that is now, we had some effort in its early creation, but the followthemoney.org now you can trace things like the campaign contributions coming from different industrial entities, whether it's power companies, atomic energy companies, that followed the bill in South Carolina to build that new unnecessary nuclear reactor that's now a $9 billion hole in the ground, and watched the money flow into the committees that actually sent that bill with no hearings to the floor in 3 days. And so we're developing the capacity to be able to monitor and understand the deviance and the corruption within the system that is legal. There's nothing illegal there. It's unethical, but unethical doesn't necessarily in South Carolina or in the United States of America mean that it's illegal. And so the money in politics effort, we did a lot of work with it. We were able to show that I think it was the 6 richest zip codes gave several times more than the 95 majority black zip codes to campaign contributions. And so that the color of money then was white. And so we had different tranches of being able to teach and reach the outreach on that. And we got a bunch of pennies and we glued pins to them, and people wore pennies on their lapel, and people would ask you, what's that for? And you say, well, that's how much it would cost you to own the elections. It's a great idea, a great campaign. Maybe someday we can do that again. But we did get something done in terms of seeing that there's a searchable campaign database now that the states is still really deficient, but there's one out there that we can use. The next thing that we looked at doing was how do we take a bite out of racism? It's so big, so wide, so tall, so incorporated into our system. As Modjeska said, it was born in the bone and can't be beat out of the flesh. So we looked at, well, how can you quantify and qualify bias? Okay, well, let's look at criminal justice records, because there's bodies associated with names and numbers right there. And so we did some research on racial disparities in the criminal justice system. And that the first thing that I ran into, I was doing the work, I ran into was that it appeared that nearly 10% of the entire black population was arrested every year, which is like unbelievable, truly unbelievable. In the United States at the time, and I don't think it's changed that much, it was like 2.5% of the white population, 4% of the black population. No other democracy, no other, democracy practicing country in the world had even 0.1, even had one. They're all 0.0 something. So we have like, I think it's 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. Well, what's up with that? And so we were then raising the question of how can we get this type of information cooked down to where people can actually use it? Well, let's see if racial profiling is a problem. Is racial profiling a problem in South Carolina? We had town hall meetings in Columbia and Charleston on racial profiling, standing room only. And one was in the Brown building at the State House with some legislators, and had Ernest Finney, the Chief Justice, was on the panel. And people telling incredible stories, families coming in, mothers testifying about being afraid of their children going out at night or being in the back seat when the officer stops them. And just story after story of people being stopped. Same thing in Charleston. We had a sled agent testify anonymously about being stopped on 17 in Myrtle Beach. And he was driving a new Ford, and he said the cop went by him and whipped around, got behind him, followed him for a while, turned the blue light on, came up, see this black man driving this new car, and he looks in and he sees the radio and a gun. And he says, "Are you a police officer?" And McKinley Weaver said, "Yes." And the guy said, "Excuse me," and walked off. And McKinley was saying, "What if I wasn't?" So there's a story after story that really substantiated the reality and was covered well by the media. And so there was some momentum there for us to then introduce legislation that would require all cops to report all stops. And we did. And Joe Neal and others were the sponsors of that bill. And that was filed in 2001. And that was the same time a war started where racial profiling became very, very in vogue. And the bill didn't go anywhere. And then in 2006, the federal government said that any states that don't have a mandatory seatbelt bill will not receive any federal highway money. And this is hundreds of millions of dollars that a lot of rich people make money off of. And so they were very concerned that we get a seatbelt bill. And the legislature passed the seatbelt bill. And the governor, Mark Sanford, vetoed the seatbelt bill as a good libertarian, did not want the government getting between his head and his windshield. And so the Republican majority needed an override, 60% of both bodies. And so they went to the Black Caucus and said, what do you want to override the governor's veto of the seatbelt bill? And they said, the racial profiling bill. And the Republicans said, okay. And we said, hooray, we won. We thought we won anyway. But leading up to that, that was like one of the constants that we do and will continue to do and need to do is doing things that prepare us to take advantage of an opportunity when that thing that we're wanting to do has a chance to take a step forward, jump through an open window. That open window is the governor's veto in this instance. And that we had the bill already filed and waiting. And so it was 6 months later when the Department of Public Safety brought the regs back that they drew. They had to implement a bill to record all the stops that police make of race, gender, age. And we found out at that hearing that they had changed it. And they being 5 white guys in the conference committee between the House and the Senate on the reconciling of the seatbelt bill, which they folded the racial profiling bill into, they changed it from all cops report all stops to all cops report warning tickets. We were terribly disappointed, but the reality is it still is a very powerful tool for determining racial bias in law enforcement agencies all over the state. And so today you can go to the SCDP, South Carolina Department of Safety, DPS, and you can click on public contacts and you can click on a list of agencies. And this incredibly long scroll that starts with the A's and goes all the way down to, I don't know if there's any Z police agencies, but the whole alphabet. It's 360 police agencies. Most people have 2, a police agency and a sheriff's agency. And each one of those agencies is required by law to report every month the race, the gender, the age of the people that they stop and do not take into custody. And last year it was over 1.5 million people. That's a lot of people. And that when you look up, you can go and do this in your town, and you can look up your police, and you can see if they're reporting. And then there's a methodology or a racial profiling toolkit where you can understand the census demographics of that town, and you can determine things like we did, that if you're a young black man, for God's sake, stay off the campus of the University of South Carolina, or if you're black in Mount Pleasant, you're 6 times as likely as a white Mount Pleasant person to be stopped. And so these are things that people can use to empower themselves to go and talk to the cops. And a lot of the cops are doing it. There are some that need to be pushed to do better, and there's some that aren't even filing. But we've seen, and in the few that we've done, we've been having too many good ideas to be able to, and too few staff and a shortage of funds to be able to actually activate some of these good ideas of programmatic approaches that involve grassroots activism and a chance to do something in your own town. That we still have that in front of us. We can do that. But that the idea of being able to go in and talk to police is something that most of us just don't simply do. And that there's an aura of intimidation on authority that I think suppresses a lot of sense of freedom and liberty in this country and in this state and in your town. And so there's getting to know people is always a really critical point in terms of establishing a respectful relationship. And so this helps a community establish a respectful relationship with the authorities that are in charge of their well-being. The bill certainly needs to be worked up, and that one of the things that is a real opportunity for us is that Kyle Kriminger, who is our co-chair, and Kyle is a great researcher and statistician and demographer, And Kyle said there's over 30 agencies that haven't filed in a long time. That's against the law. And one of the things that stayed in the original bill that is now a law is that if you're not filing, you can lose your certification. And so there are 30 agencies that may lose their certification. This is something that we would want to put together as a package for maybe this fall, maybe next fall, to be able to have that same kind of research, grassroots activism, raising the attention and getting the media, and then following up with a plan. And the plan would be that we have to have this process implemented. But along with that, we've found that at least the last 7 killings by police of civilians that were unarmed were done by ex-military people. And we also found that the Criminal Justice Academy has, Slager, when he shot the fellow in Charleston, had been trained 9 weeks. They've upped it to 12 weeks now. There's none of the 30 plus countries in the European Union, you can get a gun in less than a year. And so we're putting guns in the people's hands, putting them on the street with a few weeks training, and not even asking, are you coming out of the military where you're trained to kill people? They don't even ask that at Criminal Justice Academy. And we've been in touch with people that do this professionally, the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and as part of the NYU, and the kind of the Harvard of cop shops. The woman there came and spent time here, and her assessment was that the Criminal Justice Academy is the greatest threat to public safety in South Carolina there is, and needs to be shut down. So some of these things can be tied together to improve the quality of life in South Carolina.
Brett, before you go on, would you mind if I quickly showed people how to get to the public safety reports online?
Sure. Yeah, just pull up the one that has the individual. I think every time you go, there's one that has an aggregate and the one that has every police agency. So get the right one, and then we'll be able to scroll through it from the A's down to the Z's. And it's a pretty impressive list of cop shops.
Okay. So yeah, if you are on the Department of Public Safety's website, what you're going to do, this is scdps.sc.gov. What you'll want to do first is go to resources. Oh, of course, now. Pretty, this was working like 2 seconds ago. Yeah, give me a second.
Well, I was just there, Robert. They must know we're looking at them.
I was too. Go figure. This is not to get conspiratorial, but okay. Let me just go back for a second. But okay.
Well, while he's doing that, let me tell you that I've had worked on this on and off over the years. We now have the first black colonel in charge of the High Patrol, and the Colonel Williamson totally agrees this needs to be done. All the top cops totally agree this needs to be done. This being all cops report all stops, to develop a level of trust and transparency that protects them and makes their job safer, and develops a level of trust with the community. And so it's a winning proposition that, again, we only find the 170 legislators that somehow don't want to appear to be soft on crime, promoting things that the police would support as well as the communities. There you can go. So scroll on down there, and you'll get to 2 boxes that take you to, keep going. Okay, public contact reports right there. Click on that. And then this takes you can get there by accessing just public contact reports. The specific law enforcement, the first one, click on that first box and open that, select an agency, and scroll through that. And somebody say stop when you see your hometown, and we'll look and see what they say. We're gonna stop. Oh, Cecil stopped at Anderson. Okay, Cecil. You need to do like a year search from. It's always a month behind. So do say May '03 to May 2023 to May 24. There you go. And so now this would be where where your research comes in to figure out now what does this mean? Because it's not showing the percentage of African American females. Um, and we can see that other male, African American male, that only 19.2% of the stops were African American males. And you throw in the females, that's 25%. And that's may be within, were we in the sheriff's department or the city there in Anderson, Cecil? Well, you need to know, what's
It's
the
the
turf of the cop
county,
shop? If it's the county, then you have the county population and the racial percentage,
right?
and then you'll be able to make sense out of these numbers. And so I can't comment on Anderson. That's the sheriff's department because I don't know the census records. But that's enough for that. It shows that we actually did something that you can actually use no matter where you are to be able to determine the level of bias practiced by the people that are your public servants. So you can take that down now, and we'll talk about other efforts we've had. Are there any questions about that before we move on?
Any questions at all?
Okay. Yeah, and I'm seeing my friend Nick from Charleston is with us, and North Charleston definitely needs to be looked into because they generally need a leash. So this again is is an interactive thing that actually ended up being a law that people can actually use in their own organizing wherever they are in South Carolina. And the money in politics now is the state database is terrible. It was made by people that weren't really interested in you finding out who's giving money to whom. It's not cross-referenceable. You can't do what you can do with the followthemoney.org. I would advise you all go there and put in your favorite politician and see who they're taking money from. The another one I think that was really illustrative of the work that we did, and it was a long time, and it was when we met Mike Fanning, was in 2010. Um, the well, there was one before that. Was in 2006. No, that was 2006 was racial profiling, but in 2010 the legislature empowered the Tax Realignment Commission, the TRAC Commission, and the Senate Judiciary Committee spent the better part of a year researching taxes, and they came up with a 600-page document that indicated that South Carolina was leaving more money out of the sales tax they took up than they were making. And so I think it was like 3 point something billion left out and 2 point something billion that was raised. And what was being left out were things that sometimes they didn't know how they got in there. It's like the porta toilet only had to pay like 3% tax. And so they had a really good attorney. And the newspapers didn't have to pay for string to tie up the newspapers, the ink. They didn't have to pay sales tax on things. So there's all these exemptions. And so we also don't have service taxes like some states do, where you go to a lawyer and you get charged taxes for seeing your lawyer. So we're pretty much an anti-tax state, and that there's part of the sense that drives that is that taxes help poor people, and poor people are mostly black people, and so we don't want to do that, and so we're going to just keep costs low, and keep the people poor and stupid. And so the struggle over how to handle that report was simply that the Republican sponsors that called for the tax commission to realign the taxes. They wanted to use the found wealth by adjusting some things to further reduce taxes. And this is at a time that we're still living in this time where every year there's two budget issues that are mandatory to fund. One is local government, and that happened in a slow walk in terms of one person, one vote. It started in the late 60s, actually, no, the early 60s. It started before the Civil Rights Act. And then the Home Rule Act in South Carolina passed like in 72. And that was to ensure that the senators that were appointed by the Constitution of 1895, there was one senator per county. And some counties had a whole lot more people than some counties did. And so this gave the rural senators a lot more power, but also gave the people in the larger counties a lot less representation. And so there was federal litigation that required the equalization of the numbers of people that were represented by the numbers of legislators. And so that Home Rule Act, part of that was to send money from the general budget back to the counties. Before Home Rule, the senator appointed the city councils and the county councils, and he made up their budgets. So Boss Hogg ruled. And so it was really hard getting power out of Boss Hogg's hands. And now it's the legislative delegations that do much of that. But the cities actually can have their own elections. And now the cities, after this, we're going to get 4% of the state revenue every year. And they haven't. They haven't since they passed the law because we never have the money to do that. And so they passed a proviso to shortchange the cities and the counties. And the other one is a school, the Educational Improvement Act, that set a certain amount per student that we keep not funding. And so that the ability to fund those things would require some more taxes. And so the proposal by the Republicans was to lower taxes. And so it caused quite a dust up around the state. And we worked on road shows and had presentations, and Mike Fanning was all over the state doing that. And we had a Stop the Cuts rally, and because they were going to cut budgets so they could lower taxes. Let's cut budgets and lower taxes. Great plan, race to the bottom. And then it turned out maybe 3,000 people to a Stop the Cuts rally in front of the State House, and passed out T-shirts that said "Stop the Cuts" with a hand raised with in the middle of it. And that was on a weekend. And that subsequent Tuesday, we invited people to mob the lobby. And we have videotape that's available on that. We're going to put together a package. I apologize for us being not as together here as we can be, but we have footage. It's pretty amazing, of hundreds of people in the lobby of the State House chanting "Stop the Cuts," and it stopped the music in both chambers. And Joe Neal was the chair of the Progressive Network at the time, and the speaker, Bobby Harrell, was saying, "What do your people want?" And Joe's saying, "Well, apparently they want us to stop the cuts." But what turned out, and Joe Neal reported the next day at a meeting that we had, that they increased some of the social budgets that they were cutting that had to do with indigent care and HIV prevention and whatnot, $380 million. So we bought some T-shirts and won $380 million that day. It was a wonderful show of solidarity where we actually called a direct action that got some results. The Healthy Democracy Campaign, we saw the theme song of that in the beginning in the trailer that we pulled around. Daniel and Wayne pulled that trailer in Philly, 4,000 miles around the state. And you saw different politicians from different towns standing up in different towns talking about the need to take the money. And this was an instance, it's a really good example of movement building versus transactional stuff, because we didn't have any delusion that we were going to get the legislature to accept Medicaid expansion. Nikki Haley said we didn't just say no, we said never to Medicaid expansion. and that the states of the old Confederacy, if you do the overlays, there we are again, turning down the own tax money coming back to keep people that are living below the federal poverty level out of the hospitals and driving up everybody's cost. And so it was a very complicated scheme. It's called the Affordable Care Act. Had nothing to do with health care. It was insurance subsidies. And one of the lessons here is that there have been repeated attempts in this country to create what they have in every other advanced democracy is healthcare as a right. We're the only industrial democracy that has a for-profit healthcare system. And just last year, that healthcare cost crossed 50% of the entire federal budget, and that it is now more than everything else, including the military. Everything else the federal government spends money on, healthcare costs more than that. And so this is really big business, and big pharma is driving the train, and and the lobbyists for the doctors have been. The AMA has squashed it every time it came up. I mean, Roosevelt tried to pass it. Wilson had raised it. LBJ raised it. Hillary Clinton raised it. And it gets swatted down. And that the Affordable Care Act was this compromise of, okay, well, maybe we can't give health care. Let's just give people's money to the insurance companies. And so that's what we have. And that money that was put into the Affordable Care Act for people to get insurance plans was that if you made less than 138% of the federal poverty level, you couldn't afford insurance. And so we're going to give you a free Medicaid card to keep you out of the hospitals. In South Carolina, the first year, it was $1.2 billion of our own tax money coming back to South Carolina to take care of about 235,000 people that couldn't afford health care. Nikki refused that, and that the prognosticators and the televisions and the newspapers, everybody said, well, the legislature is not even going to discuss it, and that it's a done deal, not going to have Medicaid expansion. And so the Progressive Network, this is 2014, coming up on 2014, we called for a mass rally on the first day of the legislature in 2014. It was a cold, rainy Tuesday morning. But in the previous year, in 2013, the network had been a navigator. And the states refused everything that had to do with the Affordable Care Act. Nonprofits could sign up to help people navigate the healthcare system. And we were in the Modjeska house at the time, and I just remember it being one of the hardest jobs ever, telling people they're too poor to help. That it's very difficult to understand how somebody that they worked with at a fast food joint got a healthcare policy for nothing. And they made only $60 more than the person working next to them did. But there was a cutoff that started at $15,600 a year. And if you didn't make that much, you were supposed to get a Medicaid card. If you made that much, you could get into various levels of marketplace subsidized insurance. And there were plans that don't cost anything. And so the fact that the thing was so complicated was another opportunity for us to point out the inequities involved in it and the way that the refusal of accepting the Medicaid expansion not only hurt the poor people, but it hurt the hospitals, because the idea was that the poor people, that the indigent care money, that less than the hospital lost $360 million that year, because they didn't need the indigent care money because the poor people were going to have a Medicaid card. Uh-oh, the poor people didn't get the Medicaid card and the hospitals didn't get the money. So there's kind of residual effects. It just, it was a terrible, terrible thing. It's like 41,000 new jobs lost and things like that. And that, so we had no notion that we were going to be able to make them do it, but we set out to change the dialogue. We're going to make you talk about it. And so we called this shot, a very scary shot to call a mass event on a cold and rainy Tuesday morning in January. And there was very few people there when we were setting up at 10 o'clock in the morning on the sunny side of the Capitol, the south side. But by noon, there were over 1,000 people. And we have films of that too that are at our website that you can go and click through the different videos. And the Flickr, it does in the YouTube album, isn't it, Becky? The YouTube album has that footage of the Medicaid work. And we brought in the health experts from Harvard that had developed a methodology to determine the mortality rate caused by the withholding of primary care to people. And that came up with a calculation that we were able to attribute to having the number of people that would be expected excess deaths by county by not taking the money. And I think it came out to about 1,300 people a year that Nikki Haley was willing to kill. And so that was certainly made some news, and we made some noise, and the House debated it 6 weeks, changed the bill to read, it was an act to nullify Obamacare, sent it to the Senate. The Senate debated it for several weeks, and then Glenn McConnell, who was president of the Senate, his finest hour was Brad Hutto from Orangeburg, moved that the bill was not germane because they had changed the name and the subject of it, and it wasn't germane to what the original intent was. And it was thrown out. So they spent, like 10 weeks debating this thing together, and that nothing came of it. And that during that time, we had 3 waves of people arrested, blocking the entrance to the State House, the garage to the State House, that made front page news of ministers and, and people in white coats that were medical professionals being arrested, trying to bring this to people's attention. And the chief of police arresting people, saying he had no idea before we did that the state had turned down this money that would have given a Medicaid card to the thousands of poor people in Columbia, the homeless people, that the police are having to be, social workers with guns and no drugs. And so it at least moved the ball in people's understanding of the predatory nature of healthcare in this country, and changed the dialogue. That it was a marvelous campaign in that it touched so many people and was so impactful. And they still haven't expanded Medicaid. The other one that I wanted to bring up was our Fair Maps campaign. One of I think, the most important elements to our analysis of how we do the work is that understanding that we started out as a liberal group that was doing all the liberal types of things, like endorsing all the candidates that agreed with us, whether they were going to win or not. This was 1996, and by 2002, the Republicans had seized complete control of the legislature and have had it ever since then. So we're a 22-year-old trifecta where the Republicans appoint the judiciary, they do the redistricting, and they can create districts that are safe districts for their political party. And they've been able to make clear racial decisions that these Democrats that are black, or push them over here because they're Democrats, not because they're black, in creating safe districts. And what it's done is it completely diminished the critical ingredient in democracy is compromise. Because we now have, their way or the highway, one party gets all. And so we spent considerable amount of time. We had several bills on redistricting, but finally, with the recognition that the legislature is not going to do it, and we had 2016 had paid the university $3,500 for a PhD level study from the Institute for Policy and Research on should the politicians draw their own lines, and it was an interview with over close to 900 people, and 63% of everyone, self-identified Republicans, that they interviewed said no, politicians should not draw their lines. So it's a winning effort, a winning proposal to everyone except the 170 legislators who have safe districts now. which it's like being anointed, something you've inherited. You know, there are black districts and there are Democratic districts. There's now more blacks in the Democratic caucus than there are white people, and so there's a clear racial and political gerrymandering. And what we're looking at here, these are the maps, the maps right now on the screen. Those are the maps that are in effect now. Those are the maps the Republicans drew, with some connivance from some Democrats to cut deals, and that there's little numbers here that you can't read, but this is at our website, fairmapssc.com, and that you can go there and read this better. But that what you'll see is that don't switch to the fair map plan yet. See, these are the current ones, and they're both of them have the Republicans as a super majority, meaning that they have enough votes that are Republican, enough legislators to be able to pass bills that can't be vetoed, a veto-proof supermajority in both bodies, the Senate and the House. So we took the same numbers that the people that drew these maps, and you can turn the page on both those now. We took the same numbers and drew our own maps using software that is available to anybody. Redistricting is not complicated at all unless you're trying to rig the game. And then you got to like wheel and deal, and I don't want this person in my district, and blah, blah, blah. So we took the same numbers, and what we could come up with, which is perfectly possible to do, is we created with this mapping what I refer to as a sensible middle, where there's enough of the districts that are now you see in yellow as competitive, that there's enough competition in those districts by taking the black people that have been packed in somewhere and the white people that have been bleached out of somewhere and mixing it up and not, and using essentially the more acceptable methodologies of not breaking up communities and et cetera, and ending up with competitive districts that would create a middle block of people that would have to earn the vote of people that don't look like them or think like them. They would have to honestly represent people in their district, whether they were black or white. And it would create a circumstance where there would have to be compromise to be able to stop legislation or to pass important legislation, would be a compromise between the sensible middle and the extremes. And so this is a really good plan. But the problem is in South Carolina is that in 27 states, the citizens cannot put a constitutional amendment on the ballot. And that the only states, there's 5 states that have taken redistricting away from the legislature. And those are 5 states that had the ability to go out, take up petitions, and get citizens to sign lots of petitions and put something on the general election ballot. We can't do that here. But the Fair Maps plan looks at something we can do, which is using a county level referenda process where 15% of the residents of any county can take up a petition and write an ordinance or a resolution. And so the idea here was that we could then, there's 170 legislators, you know who would support your, we have a list of people that would support it. As we move closer to it, we would challenge people, you're going to let us vote on this. And then as you get closer to it, you take up your petitions in the districts of the legislators that said they didn't want to, they're not going to let you vote on it. And one of the interesting ironies of gerrymandering is it's reducing the turnout. We just had a presidential year primary this last week, and the turnout was less than 14%. And we've been tracking the numbers, and we know that the black youth are now voting at about 10% of those that are registered. So there's like, nobody's playing it, doesn't do any good. That means that it's going to be easier to beat these people in a couple of instances. One would be in this petitioning to get, to put pressure on a legislature that would not go along with putting it on the ballot, because they're winning by 2,000 votes. Out of a House member has 38,000 people in the House district now. And we happen to know that 60 to 70% of those 38,000 people, regardless of whether Republicans or Democrats, don't want Joe or Sally to draw their own lines. So we've got to figure out a way to make a way out of no way. So this is some of the things that we do, and it's the best plan out there. They could change the law and stop and prevent municipalities or counties from being able to do that. But if they don't, this is something that couldn't be stopped. It needs time and it needs money. This again is something that understands a problem, comes up with a potential solution and a way to do things, and then organizes around it. Some of these things are going to take us building the capacity to be able to pull off quickly, cleanly, and rapidly before the bad people could try and stop it. But we have the last one I wanted to talk about was actually working within the political system. And so it's really important that we not be perceived as simply naysayers who are just opposed to voting and don't think that there's any reason for us to vote. We really believe that it's important to be strategic when we're voting, and I think that's what effective citizenship is about. And I hope all of you got a chance to read the piece that Harry Boyd wrote that was in the Time magazine. Was that this week? That was last week. It was on Thursday or Friday's edition of Time magazine. And Harry was somebody that I had a brief encounter with in 1969 when he came and was a speaker. He was a sock organizer in North Carolina, and I was a sock organizer in South Carolina. And Harry came and talked during White Awareness Week at the university, where on the anniversary of the Orangeburg Massacre in 1969, we had a week-long symposium on the economic, political, and social necessities of Black power. That's about democracy. And Harry wrote this piece. He went on to fame and glory and the founder of the Economic Policy Institute in Washington. But he talked about what we have now is passive citizenship, where it's more like performance art or more like a lottery, where you go in a couple times, well, every other year and punch a button and you see what's going to happen. You hope you're going to win something. And it's that distance between the citizen and their involvement in shaping and running a democracy than what we have now that has diminished participation. It has crippled democracy and is yielding somebody like Donald Trump that could become our next president. And in South Carolina, the good news, folks, is that if Trump wins, it's not going to change much here. We're already experiencing that type of fascist repression and white supremacy for a long time here. And I just can't see it getting much worse, no matter who's in charge of the nation. And that, but the idea that citizenship, effective citizenship, is the answer. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take or what all we're going to have to do, but we know that if we don't educate people to be involved and to build the communities of shared values to get us through these difficult times, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty anyway, but we can at least do things that make us feel like we're doing worthwhile work. And that the work that we have done over the years with being on the inside as well as the outside at the same time started in 2000 in a really distinct fashion. We had created a progressive caucus within the Democratic Party. There wasn't a caucus, and that the largest constituent group in the Democratic Party is Black women, and they were not represented on the dais, and that it was pretty clear that the paternalism of the good liberals and the neoliberals was running the show, and that our caucus started having breakfast before the convention, and I've been a delegate. And, you know, in spite of my open criticism of the party, I've been a delegate and participated in it since 1978. And so we were able to have events prior to the conventions from 2000 until 2014 that drew up to 200 delegates. And the next largest thing was like a dozen people dropping in for the coffee and donut from the Women's Council. And so it was a serious effort that was able to, in 2006, control the floor of the convention by overriding the chair. You override the chair by getting 20% of the delegates present to vote to override the chair. And there's 1,000 people in the room, so that means you got to have 200 people stand up. And in '06, we challenged them over caving in on the anti-gay marriage amendment that the Republicans had put on the general election ballot to drive their people to the polls. And we got to debate that and take a stand on it, because damn near everybody in the room stood up. And then in the campaign that we had been doing since '07 was a resolution to stand for something. We kept bringing this up, and we got it passed in '07 for the party to actually have a platform that they posted and stood for something. And then they take it down, they put it up. And so we were a thorn in their side. And that in 2014, it was over Medicaid expansion. And the candidate, Vince Shaheen, in 2014, had lost to Nikki Haley by 59,000 votes in 2010. And then in 2013, Nikki vetoes the Medicaid expansion. And it becomes a really big issue. And we had a meeting, I had a meeting with Vince Shaheen and talked about the people that had been deprived of Medicaid expansion were about 40,000 people. Most of them were registered voters, and that could be the difference of him winning or losing, because the Medicaid expansion was one of the few things that a governor could do with a signature. Most of the federal money is federal money, and you don't get to do anything other than kind of parse it out. But in this instance, a governor could refuse to sign the state up. And so Nikki was blocking this money. Vince Shaheen could have won campaigning on this issue and taken the money. And Vince told me, I can't touch Obamacare. And that is reflective of the fact that the Democrats have had a long theory that they need, he lost by 4%, so he thinks he's got to convince 4% of the Republicans to vote for him, maybe 5%, and ignoring the hundreds and thousands of people that would vote for him if he stood for something. They continue to use that cycle and continue to lose using that cycle. And so we were, after 2014, that embarrassment that we put them through, the executive committee of the Democratic Party wrote bylaws to create caucuses. We've been the only caucus for 14 years. And the bylaws required the party chair to appoint the first chair of the caucuses. Caucuses had to have all these different officers in the party. And the caucuses had to support the platform, which had never been a problem because the progressives wrote the platform. But the caucuses had to support the candidates that didn't have to support the platform, which we found unethical. And so we cannot participate. With the hope that someday there would be a new organizational effort to bring back a progressive caucus. And so what happened, this is a great story in the way that dividing and conquer seems to work. There are now 15 caucuses that the people apply for a caucus, and they have so many people that, that you got to have 25 people, and they got to be in X number of different counties and whatnot. But essentially, you are a cheering squad for the Democratic Party, but it's an opportunity for people to do something and be involved and be a leader. And so we now have a Black caucus, a Black women's caucus, a business caucus, a disability caucus, an education caucus, an environmental caucus, a faith caucus, a health caucus, a Hispanic caucus, a labor progressive caucus, an LGBT caucus, a rural caucus, a senior citizens caucus, a single parents caucus, and a veterans caucus. They can't get anything done, because they're competing with each other for who is more oppressed and that. If when there was one caucus, I would think all these people would be progressives, trying to push an issue that's being suppressed, then you're going to be progressive. But it's something that is broken that could be fixed by the people that are participating in it. So I would encourage everybody to go to their precincts and get elected and go to the state convention and raise hell. I did it for many years and I'm tired, and it's your turn. But that inside-outside game, it's really important that we play it enough to where we're not complete naysayers. Because what we have now is the saying used to be that states are the laboratories of democracy. States are the laboratories of fascism now. Counties and cities are the laboratories of democracy. We can pass resolutions. We can pass ordinances. We could pass one in Richland County to have publicly financed elections. We could do all kind of stuff if we pick our battles and they're honest and we're not the Democratic Party. We're doing it because we share your values. And so there's a future for us in that type of strategic, effective citizenship. But the main thing that we're out to do right now is to create a community of shared values to support each other, and these times are going to get a lot harder. And Dr. Green, I want to open it up for questions and observations and criticisms and comments. Now, what you're not getting now, you're going to get later, is real specific skill sets. And we can talk about that here in a minute as to what you'd like to see. We need to do short courses on understanding things, understanding state government, understanding this whole question of like the home rule thing. When did this happen? You mean we didn't even have local elected officials until the mid-70s? So there are substantive matters that need to be understood to put the puzzle together to see how badly that the government has been derailed by the people that pay attention. I mean, you know, the realtors are making the laws about zoning. The commercial developers that live in Atlanta and Chicago are getting to build student dormitories where the majority of the students at the University of South Carolina are now from New Jersey and Connecticut. So our lives are being run by people that don't live here, and we need to step up to that. Dr. Green, take some questions.
All right, folks, are there any questions? Any questions? Go ahead, please. Yes.
I actually just had a comment about gerrymandering and just so as Brett already just established, it is awful, but it's even more awful when you consider the fact that the furthest to the extremes are the people who vote in the primary elections. So that is why the extreme right Freedom Caucus chalked up some big wins on Tuesday, because they essentially, it is a competition to be as far from the middle as possible. And in terms of the right itself, that means we're getting people who want to ban books, who want to curtail even further our reproductive rights, who want to pass all manner of things that I personally disagree with. And part of it is because, again, 13.6% of people voted in the primary on Tuesday, and they are the most extreme voters, and they push everything to the right. And in the general, maybe they'll have a Democratic challenger, probably not. So we need to fix gerrymandering.
Yeah, and the Better Ballot Initiative, the Better Ballot Initiative she's working on is something that is one of those things that prepare for that opportunity, because what could happen with that is the same thing that happened with some of the sentencing reforms, is when the Republicans got convinced they could save money by doing something. And in the instant runoff, where you don't have to keep running, can save money. And so that may win for reasons that don't have anything to do with democracy, but I really do applaud the work on the Better Ballot Initiative. And that, yeah.
Any other questions? Plenty of time for questions.
From Nicole's experience, and what you were talking about, Brett, with the caucuses.
I was wondering if you'd bring that up.
So we had some fun this last convention.
Yep.
Where, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically there was a very mild resolution, ceasefire resolution in the past, extremely mild, pulling out even any verbiage about nuclear weapons or war or anything. And so like several people went through a really, really complicated process to try and get amendments. We're actually lucky enough to have a table at the convention. And then because of bad acoustics and also,
I wouldn't call it bad acoustics. I would call it improper wording from the people, or obscuring language from the people with the mic. So essentially, we needed that we were trying to add amendments to the ceasefire resolution to actually give it some teeth. And to do that, all of the resolutions were going to be voted on in a slate. So we needed to break them up so that we could discuss them. And a motion was put forward to do this. I seconded. And instead of the chair saying, all in favor of reading the motion or reading each of the resolutions names one at a time, or what, I forget exactly how it was worded, but instead of saying that, he said, all in favor of throwing out the rules of the convention. And technically that is what it was, because we wanted to change the rules, and that is technically correct. But if you were not paying attention and if you didn't understand what was happening, because at this point, the resolutions happen later in the day, everyone cares about electing the delegates, nobody cares about the resolutions. You get tired people who aren't paying attention. And if you're not paying attention, everyone's like, I don't want to throw out the rules. So everyone voted against it. And I'm like, great. Okay, well, that was that.
I think it goes back to your point of stand for something.
Yes,
And be clear.
yes.
Yeah, I would encourage everybody to go beat their head against the wall in some of the State House hearings. It will help you understand what else needs to be done.
Sounds
So-
just like the faculty meetings, but I digress.
But some of the skill sessions that we want to offer would have to do with understanding local government, and that this state government. I need people to suggest things. You can send an email, you can shout it out now. Think that something you would like to know that we could be able to have expertise, unpack that, and have like we can have it in person, we can have it on Zoom, on different topics. It's the type of thing that we've been wanting to do since we started the school 10 years ago. And it was never intended that this just be a 4-month-long kind of graduate level course, but having very, very few people and very little money, we have not been able to focus. It's the whole idea of this transition and the new bylaws during the pandemic was to allow Becky and I to step back from what we call the forward-facing work to focus on the educational work in the school and the building. And so we're moving that direction just a lot slower than we anticipated. So anybody have any ideas about what they would like to do with their time in terms of putting what you've learned here to work?
Any ideas for projects? Any ideas at all? I would say no idea is too crazy, but let's not test that idea this evening. But if you have any ideas at all, please put them out. Yes, please, go ahead.
I think I know what I would personally find very useful, is a combination of missing voter project and looking at either whether it's follow the money or follow policy, but looking at how South Carolina's policies, politicians affect the world, and then how it comes back to South Carolina. So making that whole connection and then using that to educate voters and engage them outside of the election cycle. That's something I'd be very interested in helping with or starting on with.
We'll tell you, we'll follow up on the idea of the missing voter project with ease. That's something we've been working on for a number of years now. And we have exciting opportunities with the NAACP and the HBCUs and the technical schools. We have enough money to do training sessions to create a leadership team of that within that young black cohort that has voted. And out of the approximately about 135,000 young black people that registered to vote and have voted once, only 10% of that cohort have voted. They're registering in the 70s, below 70%, 72, 3%. Only 10% are voting. Their parents are still voting a little above 50% in a 4-year cycle. But the younger people simply aren't voting, but we have their names and addresses. And so the idea with the Missing Voter Project is to spend this year identifying leadership teams from the HBCUs and the county NAACPs and the State Educational Association. We have some tentative agreements to work with their 46 county offices. And so this will be giving people out in the field something to do in their hometown to be able to, we identify the 10% more or less in each county and reach out and see how many of the 10% respond and want to take the next step. And those that take the next step and get, the t-shirt, the hat, the database on their phone of the peers that they went to high school with that are registered and not voting. And to start spreading this exciting notion that we can make Ben Tillman crawl up out of his grave screaming when everyone realizes that the reason that Tillman's Constitution of 1895 devolved the power down from the executive, we had the least powerful governor in the nation because there were more black people that could vote in South Carolina than white people. Well, now there are more black people not voting that are registered in South Carolina than the white people that are voting. So we can turn that around, but it's got to be exciting. It needs to be like, have you heard? Did you know we could do this? And to make it go viral. We got 2.5 years to do it, and it's a long march, and it's not quite as exciting as getting into a campaign where you're going to vote for Sally, and she may or may not win, and it's over with, and you win or lose. This is a long game, but being able to, I think, if we really focus just on the superintendent of education, who is just an affront to the concept of education, that I think we can take her out. If we could arrange the taking out of some Republican that is on the statewide office, it would be a real bell ringer. And right now, the governor and the attorney general and the superintendent of education, in the last 16 years, the last 4 general elections for a midterm, they won by no more than 220,000 votes, and sometimes less. And we have the names and addresses of pushing 600,000 registered black people who aren't voting because it doesn't do any good. So we use their kids to be able to put pressure on them. So that's something that we'll be working on. That's a slow rolling project. And some of the other things we could do with greater rapidity.
Any other project that is? Any other project that is? And by the way, just a point of clarification, when Brett says taking people out, he's not literally meaning taking people out. He's talking about using the electoral process to get better people in office. So in case certain people watch this video, that's what Brett meant. Okay. Because Brett, you can go underground. That's a bit more difficult for me to do. But Cecil's hand was up, and then we got a few hands in the audience here too. Cecil, go ahead, please.
Just a quick comment about it being a long process. I took Modjeska classes last year, and it has taken me until just a few weeks ago to become certified in some of the database work that Brett's talking about, which I hope to use now to support the efforts that he's been talking about. So it is a long haul proposition, and but it is definitely worth it, and I've learned so much, and it's made me a better advocate for the kind of things we're doing here. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Cecil.
Hillary, you're on.
Nicole?
Oh, sorry. And my names and everything.
No worries. Just making sure it was me. I also love the Missing Voter Project, and I am excited to help out with that. But I also, I want to do some kind of civics education. I recognize that there is a lack of that in the general population, and understanding of how our government works, and especially on the local level, because a lot of people, like, it's a presidential election year, everybody's focusing on the president, and he's important, but so is everybody else on the lower end of the ballot. And municipal elections are in odd years, and they have even worse turnout a lot of times. So the importance of who they are, and what they can do. I want to get the word out.
Nicole, that reminds me of something that we need to dust off, and actually I think Kyle has worked on it most recently. We called it Democracy 101, and it was a presentation we could tailor to time. I mean, we can do it in 45 minutes, or we could do it in, a couple hour session. But it really sums up what we're talking about with effective citizenship, and it's a quick down and dirty civic education class that was PowerPoints that people could either use, but there was a script that went with it. And just to get it out there is something that we have one, we can dust it off, and I'll be glad to talk with you, and you can help tailor it in terms of the language that needs to be heard.
Fantastic. Any other, go ahead, please.
My name's Cora, and I've also been in this class, you can tell. I recently went to Cuba, and I have my Cuba report back on this Thursday on Zoom. So if anybody who wants to come, you can definitely do that. But that kind of connects to my idea. I want to do more report backs, like with my friends and like extended people in my community on experiences we have with like international solidarity practices, and also like media that we consume online. And then one of my friends who's actually finished, who I met on the Cuba Brigade, we want to do this project where we kind of like redo our assignments that we were assigned in school when we were younger. And yeah, like I know other people here, I've collected some things like from when I was in high school, of course, or even before like middle school. And I can really look back and see how I was like propaganda, like taught how to really like be an agent of like US imperialism, like to believe in corporations and all this type of stuff. Like they're like really like minor 1-page assignments, and I can like see things about what I was taught about a teenage pregnancy, things that are like were haha like funny then, but now I read them like, oh my god, this is very insidious. Yeah. And so yeah, like we had this concept of like redoing your old assignments where you try to like re-educate you and your friends and like this general community members, because I don't believe that stuff anymore now, of course, I'm here. But a lot of people still do, as we can tell. Like a lot of people who you encounter in the classroom or just in general, like, our friends that are teachers are being miseducated. So I think it's a good way to like almost have like kitchen conversations with people about the ways that we have like trained to misstep by the SC education system. And that's how I want to apply my knowledge here.
Well, first off, Cora, make sure to share that information about your Zoom on Thursday with us. You can email me or
Okay.
so we can get that out to the rest of the school. But I think actually we've had a couple folks now this evening talk about the international nature of what's going on in South Carolina. And again, I think this is, I feel like there's a germ of something here in terms of another project or kind of latching on to the other project we're talking about this evening. In terms of making it clear, not just to folks in the Progressive Network, but folks that we're reaching out to, that, again, what we're doing here in the Palmetto State doesn't just stop at the Palmetto State's borders. I mean, just think for a second about who our two senators are, Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham. They both have tremendous influence, for better or for worse, on U.S. foreign policy. And that's part of a long tradition of politicians from this state having a tremendous influence on not just foreign policy, but on ideas of American empire, American imperialism, and the like, up to the present day. So I think there are some things we could do here in terms of the projects we're talking about, but also linking them to, on the one hand, the local, and on the other hand, the national, international aspects of what we're talking about. But I think the biggest thing, again, as folks have been saying is, and I'm glad folks have already realized this, we can't just wait for election years to do this kind of work. It has to be done between election cycles as well. Yes, Cora, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I feel like the international sphere is definitely something to talk about, because even though lots of my friends and families and people in my community understand like the harms the U.S. does domestically to us, people are still taught to be defenders of empire when it comes to people abroad all the time. Like they're like, oh, like the U.S. is bad to us, but those people. And I'm like, no, you're the people. Like, everybody wants to be a bootlicker, but the bootlicker's gonna always stuff your own head in. Like, so I think that is definitely a good part of this class to have as it already has had, like an international list sphere. So
Absolutely.
Any other ideas for short courses or projects? Yes, Taylor.
So, as many of you probably have heard, Liberation is Lit has had to pivot because the space that we thought we were going to be in, we are no longer in. So I'm doing a lot of like rethinking, restructuring, and really getting back to like the roots of why I started Liberation is Lit. And like a lot of you all have said today, just talking about like that educational piece that's on like civics, like connection to like international. I definitely want to use the book as a resource for that. I am currently researching and thinking about like maybe turning it to a nonprofit so I can do some of that programming. And definitely using Liberation is Lit as a resource, whether that's like if you want to put together like suggested reading lists that I can blast out, or like collaborating with something, starting book clubs, things like that. I feel like programming like that is how do I say more approachable for a lot of like people. They're like, oh, I'm going to like read a book and like talk about this, and it's like, okay, we're going to talk about the book, but we're also going to talk about so like using more like approachable aspects, because people say hear politics and they automatically shut down. So I'm trying to figure out ways through Liberation is Lit how to really make this kind of educational accessible and digestible, I guess, to people who are just like, I just get burned out by politics and like what's going on. So like finding ways to like re-engage and reactivate people who may not be as passionate as us to went to a 16-week conference on like the real history of South Carolina. So definitely looking for collaboration in that regard.
That's a wonderful idea. Because I think, again, one of the things that the Progressive Network prides itself on is meeting folks where they are. And certainly trying to engage with them however we can, whether it's through Fair Math Project or what you're talking about here with book club and the like, and we're just engaging folks. Because I think, again, there was someone that mentioned earlier this evening, where's that quote? There was a great quote I just saw. Yeah, from Cheryl's put a quote in the chat. Even if you are not political, politics will come to you. I think that's something that has been proven time and time and time again, especially in recent years, where in our current age of everything being a culture war, politics is, of course, everything. Okay, so Cecil had in the chat, he said a short course on socialism, seriously, ask Brett to comment on it. So Brett, I think this is one for you to comment on.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Cecil has discovered an e-book that we have that he could open on his PC, and that it's a several-year-old publication called Socialism Seriously, written by a socialist comedian. And it is the easiest way to explain socialism to somebody. There's some books on the shelf over there, a little blue book that you can look at and borrow and bring back. But there's also e-copies that we can send to people, and we'll do that before graduation. Make sure everybody gets an e-copy of it, because it's a short and engaging read that just makes the absence of democracy just like silly. Why would you possibly let that happen to your country? And so thank you, Cecil, for bringing up that which it is that we need to get out before graduation. Also need a head count on how many people are actually going to come in person, because we have to tell our chef how many people are going to stay for dinner, which will be shortly after 5 o'clock. The graduation will start at 2. The Modjeska Simkins house will be open at 1. For people that haven't been there, this is an opportunity. It's not open very often, and those of you that don't live in Columbia, this is a chance to come and see the house. And then we expect to be able to serve dinner shortly after 5, and people that we need to know who's going to stay. So if you could put something in the chat, and then Gabby will take your name as to who's going to be here before you leave tonight. We expect all of you to have a few words to say, a very few actually, a couple of minutes, as you take your diploma. And we've found that the recordings of people at graduation are really keep us going. That's testimonials about people, what they've gained from it and what they felt it was worthwhile doing. And so the thing starts at 2 right here at the Grow Building. And those of you that we have only seen virtually, we want to see you in person if we certainly can.
Again, that's this Saturday at 2 o'clock. So June 22nd. Yes.
If we come late, so like, what is are people getting their diplomas the first thing when it starts, or?
No, if you come in a bit late, I will give you a sternly worded lecture. I'm kidding. No, you'll be
I can take that.
you'll be fine. I mean, how late are you talking about?
30 minutes.
No, you'll be fine. We'll just make sure to let us know you'll be coming in advance, because, for example, in the past, we've given diplomas to folks who came in a bit later than the name was called. That's totally fine.
Okay.
We'll make sure to get you before you leave that evening. And not get you like a bad second. Just make sure you get you before. Yes.
Yeah, so one of the projects that I know that I want to help with is reviving the idea of the monument store. And also I would love to extend that to some of the other big landmark places in the city and maybe surrounding areas. We should get a van. That some of these, major events happen, just to, one, get us out of the classroom and to engage with the public, and also to make the story feel rooted in place. So that's something that I am very excited about. So, and probably gonna be a lot of work, so I'm probably gonna need help.
Well, I can tell you, you'll have some help from me on that, because I also want to see the Monuments Project resume and pick up. And I can tell you, I actually give a history tour of Claflin's campus in Orangeburg, where, typically with a college campus tour, it's about, this is where you go as a student to, pay your tuition, or this is where you go to the game room or what have you. But my tour is more about, these buildings were built at this time for this purpose. This is where this particular on-campus riot took place, things like that. Talking about the history of the campus and couching it on a broader perspective. So I think certainly with the Monuments Project, we've been doing that in the past. And I think you're right too. There are plenty of sites in Columbia, in the Midlands, and across the state where we could apply that same way of looking at monuments, not just in terms of, hey, there's this nice statue of this person, and saying, oh, by the way, that guy was a slaveholder, just FYI, right? So again, I think there's a lot we can do with that. That would be great.
Also, with that, also like maybe an interactive map as well for people who aren't necessarily going to come out for a tour, like just creating digital resources for people as well, which I also have no idea how to do. So it's like kind of like an idea.
Could you explain what the Monuments Project is? I don't know.
Can I? That's a great question. I think they're guided tours of largely state house monuments and telling the actual history behind that. Robert might be able to.
People take tours at the state
Yes.
house now.
So how we've done in the past is, when we gave the monuments tour, we would assemble on the State House grounds. And the usual tour is, okay, this is a statue of, say, Ben Tillman. This is a statue of Strom Thurmond. The monuments tour is, okay, A, this is what Ben Tillman actually did. And B, this is the more important part. This is why the statue was put up. For example, the Ben Tillman statue was erected in 1940. And so the way we interpret that is saying it was put up at a specific point in American history where the fight against segregation was started to intensify in the South, and it's put up on purpose, right? So we talk about not just the monuments, but when they were erected and why they were erected. That's part of the story of the Monuments Tour as well. Yes.
So going off of that, I think a cool interactive map is a great idea, but I also like YouTube videos to go up on YouTube of of like, you know, us taking the tour, and you can describe it and
Oh, yeah,
accessible for more people, and
Those are big.
that kind of.
That's,
I also don't know how to do it.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody
You know.
does.
I'm sorry, I've got
have two things.
Sounds like it's on a YouTube video.
Oh, yes, go ahead, please.
Piggybacking on the same idea is doing some like field trips to some of the bigger locations in South Carolina. St. Helena Island and some of the other bigger historical places. And also the African American Museum in Charleston. I got the name wrong. But then another thing is just environmental initiatives.
Okay. Betty's had her hand up for a while. Betty, go ahead, please. Yes, Betty, go ahead.
Oh, the audio is not working.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your audio is not working, Betty. Could you try muting yourself and then unmuting yourself? That trick works sometimes. Okay, and unmute. Just try again. No, we still can't hear you.
Put your question in the chat, Betty.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Betty, go ahead and put your question in the chat if you can. Suzanne, I see you have your hand raised too.
Hello.
Hello there. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm interested in the missing voter project and would like to contribute to that.
We'll have in the next couple of weeks, we can have a meeting with people that want to find out what we're doing, what needs to be done, and how they can help. And then we'll also have that introductory course about Democracy 101 ready to roll, I hope, in the next 2 weeks.
Cool.
And this is Brett. I also want to support, and I really appreciate the framing of the Missing Voters Project. So in terms of being led by Black folks, connecting with Black folks. And so if I can be supportive, writing, researching, things in the background, would want to do that. I wanted to pitch an idea and see what folks think too, because I came to the course being concerned about housing as one of my kind of long-term social justice concerns. And folks may know that over 50% of South Carolinians are housing insecure, where they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing, and more than 25% are severely insecure and paying more than 50%. And South Carolina has some of the highest eviction rates of any state in the country. If you compare Mobile, Alabama to Columbia, South Carolina, the eviction rates in Columbia are much higher. And you look at the laws about that, Mobile requires that an attorney be present. They require that the fees are $180 in Columbia, and South Carolina much cheaper. And so it becomes an issue with homelessness, because when people have a eviction filing made, may even be an eviction filing in error or not applicable to their situation, that still goes on their record. Landlords can see that, and people have a harder time getting housing. And it turns out that a number of evictions are filed by these large companies, and there's no accountability in terms of the eviction filing. It seems to me like there could be a project, maybe people are aware of some, but there could be a project that could help change the state laws to come more in line with other states. But right now, it's tilted so far toward landlords and property management companies that if there's any interest, or could use it as a harassing instrument to have people be intimidated or leave their housing, then they can raise their rent. The evictions rates are so high here. North Charleston, Columbia are really, really high. And And we just obtained some data about this. That I work at the university, and so that's part of my interest. But we have data now that we can go through and work toward that. And the data part combined with action, that's what I want to think with people about.
Great. I just got back from the city council's little dog and pony show about the new centralized campus that they're trying to build, which I have very mixed feelings about.
Yeah.
But because there's a lot of eyes on that, it might be worthwhile to sort of use that opportunity to change the conversation a little bit towards the root of the issue. And so anyway, if you want to hit me up, we can talk about that.
Yeah. Is that Josh?
Yeah, this is me, John. Hi.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
This sounds like a housing meeting coming up. We had in the past have tried to do things with the housing authority. There are 8,000 in residence, 8,000 on a waiting list, and 8,000 that haven't made a waiting list. That's 16,000 people in Columbia that make incredible voting block that are being screwed. And we've got the names, but we just haven't had the juice to pull that off. But I've spent enough time reading the HUD regulations to know that there's clearly different ways that it can be done. So that's Josh, you're nominated to coordinate the housing meeting.
Okay.
All right. Yes, go ahead, please, Gab.
All right, so one of the questions I get asked most often is, how can I get involved? What can I do to help? And so project that I would like to be a part of, and everybody who knows anything, please reach out. But I would like to do community resource mapping, where we can look and see what people in our communities are already doing so that we can come together and support each other's efforts. And then also when someone comes up to you and asks, how can I get involved? We have a way to instrumentalize or to lead them to what they're interested in doing and helping. And that's another way, I think, to combat the divide and conquer as well.
Excellent. Go ahead, please.
Jumping off of that, like, I think a really big problem is that you guys have all these projects and like most students on campus want to be doing things but don't know what to do. And you guys talk a lot about lack of access to like a newspaper anymore. I think it would be really cool to connect something like a community resource map with student-led newspapers that are already on campus, on USC's campus, because like the journalism school can be political and they just don't know where to look. So I think it'd be really cool if we could connect that on campus already.
Cool, thank you.
Sounds great. By the way, Josh, Todd Simon also says he's interested in helping out the housing project as well. Betty was able to put in the chat, she says that she is interested in the missing voter project, especially in terms of looking at African-American males. But yeah, she has plenty of ideas. Betty, you'll be here for graduation Saturday, correct? Okay, we'll talk Saturday for sure. I want to make sure we can follow up on that. Anyone else? Again, we've got some great ideas and some great resources, and most importantly, we've got some great people to execute these projects. Any final ideas? Again, if your idea doesn't get heard this evening, you need more time to think about it, that's totally fine too. But again, we got some great ideas on paper already tonight.
So this is Greg Howell. Hello, everybody. I don't know if this is an idea or not, but just an idea for a class. As I mentioned in an email, I was able to actually talk with Dr. William Darity of Duke, who's probably the nation's premier expert on wealth inequality. And I pitched to him, if given the opportunity, would he talk to the class? And he said that he'd be more than happy. So I wanted to, I was talking with him in regard to wealth inequality in South Carolina, and he just, he pointed out that unfortunately, state level data on wealth inequality or on wealth period is far and hard to come by. There is national data that the Federal Reserve does, but really no statewide data anywhere that's worth anything. So But again, he come maybe lay a foundation, and we can understand the implications for lack of wealth on populations.
Excellent. We'll follow up on that for sure. We'd love to have him in class. Anyone else? Plenty of ideas. I think the most important thing right now is trying to really fill out the folks who are going to be participating in these projects and be getting some game plans in place to get the projects off the ground. But we've got some wonderful ideas here this year.
I have a really logistical question.
Go ahead.
How can we expect to be in communication? I think I missed the orientation, so I think there's maybe like a chat, or app, or a chat or something.
The chat.
Yeah, but is that the best way to communicate with people who are expressing interest in heading up teams, or email?
That's a good question.
Or can we is that where people have shared contacts? And I'm just missing out on that.
There's probably like 4 or 5 or 6 people who are active in the chat, and then otherwise it's not the most active, which is to be expected. So there's probably better ways that we could get mutually connected, even just phone numbers.
I think it would be great if there was an Excel sheet with contacts, phone numbers, emails, and areas of interest that could then be sent out to the same email group that's getting the weekly. Because then that could be shared further and updated.
We can do that, but if somebody wants to opt out of that and doesn't want their information shared, they'd have to tell us that we're going to opt everybody in unless you say, don't send my name and address.
I meant like an ethical one that people put their own info in.
Yeah.
So I see your hand is raised. Go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I
Go ahead,
would
Cecil.
suggest that.
I have a question about the upcoming meetings that Brett talked about. Will some of those be on Zoom, like the one for Missing Voter Project, so people who are not in the area down there can get information too?
Yeah, see, so I think we'll just start with probably this class. We have a lot of back work to do to correct our deficiencies over the pandemic and letting our people that have been former graduates drift away and all, but reconstituting and reaching out and to the membership, to people that have been with us that aren't with us now, is part and parcel to it, but we can't do it all at the same time. So the first steps we take would be within this group here, and then maybe this group here can then help contact other people that have evidenced an interest in the same things. We'll move deliberatively, transparently, and get her done.
All right, well, it is 8:25. Are there any final questions or comments for the good of the order this evening?
Well, Cecil, I want to encourage people to come and just share some community with us next Saturday. We wanted to have time where we can get to know the people that have been on Zoom that we haven't seen. And everybody, we're going to send you some preparatory stuff to be practicing our song, our fight song. Everybody's going to have to sing our fight song. We're going to be in person, and you can see Dr. Green's really excited about this. But it's you can't have a revolution without music, folks. Seriously, it's required. Teaba?
As a quick plug event, tomorrow here at Grove, 6 to 8 is gonna be a movie night. I believe it's the Abby Martin documentary, Gaza Fights for Freedom, but that's tomorrow here.
So funny enough, I also have a plug for the exact same time, because Columbia little things at the same time. I would first I would highly encourage you to come to the event here at Grove tomorrow evening. But if you are near the Nickelodeon Theater at 6 o'clock for Juneteenth, They are showing and I'll just share my screen real quick. They're showing the film, The Blinding of Isaac Woodard. That was, if you watched it on PBS, it's that same documentary. And they were hosting a talk back. I'll be part of a panel discussion after the film is shown as well. So you've got two exciting things to do tomorrow in Columbia at 6 o'clock, either here at Grow or at the Nick. I would highly encourage you, if you can, to come to the event here at Grow, though, because I think events like that are especially important for community building. And also, as much as I want folks to learn more about the blinding of Isaac Woodard, and this is deeply important, but I've also realized that there are a hell of a lot of people who don't know a damn thing about Palestine. So if you want to learn more about that, you really should come to the event tomorrow evening here, if at all possible. But we got two events in Columbia at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, so you
Now,
can't
I
miss
like that as well. If you do miss, like, if you want to go to this and you want to watch the documentary, I think the documentary is available on YouTube as well. So once you just want to educate yourself, you can.
Gaza Fights for Freedom by Abby Moore.
Thank you. Mutual.
And again, don't forget that this Saturday, June 22nd, which is the anniversary of the beginning of Operation Barbarossa in World War II, but that's a sheer coincidence. Again, this Saturday at 2 o'clock, we are having our graduation. Again, please let us know if you'll be coming here for graduation. Again, this is a great time for fellowship and commiseration. I know that in the class, we talk a lot about projects, talk a lot about history, we talk about a lot of difficult and tough subjects. But a critical part of being revolutionary, no matter the time period, is actually fellowship with each other, with fellow revolutionaries, with men and women who care about the same things as you do. Because at the end of the day, knowing there are others who also want to make South Carolina a better place to live in really makes the day worth living, really makes life worth living. So I want to thank all of you in this classroom and on Zoom for making this Modjeska Simkins session the best one we've had yet. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you this Saturday as well. So again, good night.
Thank you also, Dr. Green. Thank you for your wonderful.
Godspeed.